Hello, this is Miss Andrea, and this is another live video. Today's topic is no holds barred. Ask any question you want pertaining to homeschooling. As I always say at the top of my videos, I love having an audience, but if I don't have an audience, that's fine. I'm here to get the information out. I'm going to go ahead and start with a question that someone asked as my last live video was closing out. And it is, how do you build community and friends for homeschoolers? Um, and I guess this is going to sound cliche, but you build community and friends for homeschoolers the same way you build community and friends in your everyday life. Now, you do have to look for homeschoolers. These days, back when I started homeschooling, it was Yahoo groups. You'd go on Yahoo groups and you'd search homeschoolers in your area, whatever, and you would just find and you would join and you would just start talking to people and you would start building community. Nowadays, it's going to be Facebook groups, but it's the same deal. And Facebook groups is better because now you can see what the people look like. You can see a little bit more of how they behave online, if they're attacking other people, if they're being nice, if they are being helpful. And so you have a little bit more insight with Facebook groups. But you join a Facebook group for your area or not for your area. I belonged to groups for my area, and I actually belonged to a couple of groups for my ethnic orientation. It just helped to know that I wasn't the only one out there because what I was seeing was just me. So you find groups you like and you just say, hey, hi Nikita, hi Simple Life. You just say, hey, this is my general area where I live. This is a general area of my kids, looking for buddies, part day, meet up at a restaurant, whatever. If you're brand new to homeschooling, say you're brand new to homeschooling. There are people who just love helping new homeschoolers. And then on top of that, another good way to build community for homeschooling is to join a homeschool co-op, which you will also find the same way, just through asking around with people on the message groups, and or join a homeschool hybrid organization. My kids belong to an organization where they had in-person classes once or twice a week, depending on what was going on that year, depending on what their needs were at the time. In middle school, I put them in classes twice a week, just because middle school kids push back on their parents more, and I felt like our relationship was more important than me teaching them everything. So, Facebook groups, ask around, join co-ops, join hybrid homeschool programs. That is how you build a community for your homeschooling. And our strongest community was with the hybrid homeschool programs. Cost a little bit of money because it was more like a very part-time private school, but it was well worth it. My kids have friends for life from those organizations. Okay. Simple Life Grateful Wife asks, and how are you? How do you keep a seventh grader interested in reading? Let them read what they want. They just don't want to read Huckleberry Finn. You can get classics in, but if they were reading Captain Underpants when they were young, that's just their taste. Manga, middle schoolers, manga and comic books work very well. Manga, the ones that read back to front. But I do strike a deal with these kids. For every page you read in something that you chose, whether I think it's useless, whatever, you have to read a page of whatever I chose. And so that usually turns out to be for every 3 or 4 comic books they read, they need to read a classic book. They need to read that Huckleberry Finn. They need to read Around the World in 80 days. So you just have to strike a bargain. Step one, let's pick your books. You get first choice. I get second choice. So, I mean, in school, they're reading one novel a month or just passages. So, what they're reading at home, even if you're only getting them to read one book a month, they're still probably exceeding what they're getting in public school. Let them read things that interest them. And then that's going to also show you what they like. My son just didn't like any of the fantasy books. He didn't like the Harry Potters. He didn't like the Hobbit. He didn't like any of those things. I did get him to read all of Mark Twain in middle school using this approach. Like, you pick all of these comic books and we're going to do all of Mark Twain. But by the time he got to high school, it was clear to me that he just didn't have patience for fiction or fantasy. And so in high school, we read biographies, self-improvement books. He was really interested in self-improvement books. It just had to be based on reality. His favorite book that I've noticed he's read several times since then is Ghost in the Wires. He's a computer person, and it was about a hacker's confessions. So yeah, that's how you keep a seventh grader interested in reading. Let them choose at least half of what they're reading. And look, I'm not above bribery. Not above bribery. Give them some kind of token or ticket or something for every book they read, for every how many pages, and then they can collect those up and trade them in for something special. I hope that was helpful. So for people who are just joining, my name is Miss Andrea, and I am a veteran homeschool parent at this point of about 20 years. My kids have graduated, have been through college. You're welcome. I'm glad that was helpful. And my specialties are getting kids into college, whether they are homeschooled or not, and helping them get in with some kind of scholarship money. The younger they are when I start helping, the better off they are. So I'm here to answer any questions anyone has about homeschooling and or education in general. And in the meantime, I do have a list of questions here that I'm going to start answering while you all insert any questions that you have. I already answered the first question, was how you build community and friends for homeschoolers. So my next question is, why did you decide to homeschool? As in, why did I decide to homeschool? And it is a super long story, and it is on my channel in 2 or 3 places. So I'm going to attempt the abbreviated version. Children were born. The first child was born. The husband came home. I'm in no mood. I'm depressed. I'm stressed. I'm awkward. And he says, coworker of mine homeschools. I really like that, and we should look into that. And I cussed him out. I said bad things. I said what he didn't want to hear at that moment, but he understood that that wasn't the right time to approach me with the vision of staying home for the rest of my life and taking care of our children and homeschooling and doing what I saw as nothing else. Fast forward, we have a second kid, and the oldest kid is in 3-year-old. We enrolled him into a private 3-year-old preschool. And every week I said to the teacher, how's he doing? How's he doing? And she would say, oh, he's just himself. And I was like, oh, okay, whatever that means. I understand I was like 28 at the time, and I didn't know to ask more. January or February, she calls me in for a conference, and I pack up him and I pack up the baby, and we go in, and she says, I think you need to withdraw your son and bring him back next year and we can start over. And I'm like, all year you've been telling me he's just him. What are you talking about? She says, well, you know what? He doesn't speak. He doesn't speak. My son hasn't spoken all year, and you've never thought to tell me that he's never opened his mouth. I mean, I know I told you he was shy, but I didn't tell you he was mute. And in that moment, he just starts yelling at the baby because she's shoving things into her mouth. Jordan, Jordan, stop putting the toys in your mouth. And the teacher, she was very tiny. She wasn't much taller than him. Perfect size for a preschool teacher. She jumps up and she runs across the room and she gets on her knees and she gets in his face and she got his little arm and she's like, you can speak. And I'm just sitting there dumbfounded. And this is how school went for him for years. Teachers would be like, he's great. And then they'd be like, he's not so great. Or I'd go in and say, you know, he has a tendency to be mute. And then they just would be like, what's his problem? And then in like January and February, they'd be like, oh, I get it. He's so cool. And with the exception of his kindergarten teacher in New Orleans, who he had a crush on, he just really didn't perform. But we knew he was gifted because when we went to New York for a year, I realized the curriculum was the same as it had been the year before in New Orleans. And when I spoke to the teacher, they were like, well, first of all, we don't want to frustrate the other kids, which made me not answer well. And then second of all, you know, he's probably gifted. And as soon as he's able, we'll test him. The next year we moved to Georgia and they said, what makes you think your son is gifted? And it was so aggressive and so hurtful and so ridiculous. And then we started having trouble with the other child and they wanted her drugged, period. They just wanted this baby on Ritalin and they wouldn't hear anything else. End of the year, first grade, teacher calls me in, sits me down. And you know, they sit you down at these little tiny desks and stand over you just so they can have the power. You know what I mean? They'll never let a teacher do that to you. If they stand up, you stand up. And so she's like, she gives me a doctor's name and number and she pushes it to me across the table. I pushed it back and she pushes it to me across the table and I push it back. Wow, that just totally frizzed that hair completely out. And she's like, well, you need to get her on Ritalin or she's just not going to be able to do public school next year. And I said, okay. And she pushed the name and number back to me. And I pushed it back again. And she said, I don't understand. And I'm like, clearly, because guess what she's not doing next year? She's not doing public school. Thank you for helping me make that decision. And so then, you know, I get things like, oh, but your son's gifted. How are you possibly going to teach a gifted child? I'm like, now he's gifted. Now he's gifted. You know, when you guys were just so horrible to me about even suggesting that my little boy be gifted. So those were the obvious things, but just years of microaggressions toward us. We've always had the audacity to not live in segregated situations. And that audacity of forcing our way into integrated schools, into integrated situations. And I know segregation is illegal, but it happens just based on where you live. And so we've always been really strategic about where we live so that we could raise our children in an integrated society. That audacity has caused our children a lot of hurt because of the low-key microaggressions that always happen. And that's why and when we decided to homeschool. It was personal. I saw depression in very young children, very young kids, bad depression. And I saw schools unwilling to take care of them. And they were very different from each other. She was very high energy, very borderline annoying for strangers. I found her a little annoying, but she was mine, you know. And he was reserved, and he was highly intelligent, and she is highly gifted. And the schools just don't serve those extremes typically. They don't know what to do with them. And I just felt like, you know what? You can't mess up any worse than what's happening. So let's try it. Now, I also had belonged to a church at the time where several families were homeschooling. And so they, when I would come in and cry that my children were depressed and seriously, bedwetting was going on far past bedwetting should have been going on. Like my kids were not okay. They held my hand and they took me to meetings and they walked me through. And we started homeschooling the next fall. And that was how I decided to homeschool. I saw my children were not okay. And my husband who had been, like rooting for homeschooling the whole time, did an obscenely ungracious "I told you so" dance. And everyone was happy. The end. Next question. What are your favorite curriculums? There are so many curriculums out there that I like, but I am a nerd and I love technology. So, for people just starting to homeschool who just don't know what to do, I like Time for Learning, TIME, number 4, learning. It's about $20 a month per child. It covers all the subjects. It gives you computerized readouts. My daughter's first year of homeschooling many eons ago, and by the way, their prices haven't changed in 20 years. She started second grade in the fall, and by Christmas, she was done. And I called the guy up, and she was given third grade, and she finished that by late spring, maybe a month later than kids would have finished. It's just really easy to do. It feels like fun, and they don't really want to stop until they hit about fifth grade and decide that it's for babies. I think they've brought it up a little, but at the time it was super like cartoonish, like Dora the Explorer-ish cartoony, and my kids tired of it after a few years. But for new homeschoolers with young kids, and even they have a high school program too, I really think people should try out Time for Learning. It's just easy to administer, easy to do, and leaves a lot of spare time for you to do homeschool extras. When we start moving up in the grades, I like Khan Academy. I wouldn't use Khan Academy without a textbook. I would have them read the textbook, correlate the textbook to what's going on in Khan, and also watch the videos. And that's how I would do it. But I love Khan Academy. I did not turn that TV on. My husband turned it on from remotely. Don't you love it? I'm gonna take a second and close that door. So, what was I saying? I love Khan Academy. It just covers all the important subjects, and for math especially, it tests them through in a secular way so that they don't forget old functions while learning new functions. It always takes them back. to make sure they know it. Likewise, Alex, Aleks, costs a little bit, maybe like 20 a month or something. I like that a lot. Let's see. What else do I like? I like YouTube in general. For science and history, I love the Green Brothers Crash Course series. And I think my last post listed the last edited video on this channel lists a lot of videos and documentaries that your children can learn from in all grades. When we get to high school, I like to do a combination of the textbook and YouTube videos because they need to kind of know what everyone else is knowing if they're college bound. Now, I don't stop at what the textbook offers. I insert other important topics. I insert current events. I insert, forgotten history and things into that. I make room for it and I make time for it. But I'm like, okay, we're on channel 15. We're going to read this material. And I'm not going to lecture you. I'm going to find 4 or 5 really engaging videos for you to watch with that, so that this information is cemented and discussed and you've got something to think about. So my favorite curriculums would be Time for Learning, Khan Academy, both, Time for Learning is about 20 a month, Khan Academy is free. Alex is about 20 a month, mostly for math. I like public school textbooks. They cost like $20 used online. I'm just not a huge fan. Oh Lord. Every time I say I'm not a huge fan of box curriculums, I lose followers and I lose support. But I'm just not. We live in a digital age and I don't want to be bound by homeschool curriculums written by homeschoolers for homeschoolers. I want us to individualize our education more than that. What is the point of even homeschooling at all if we're still following rules? We go from following the public school rules to following the private school rules. What is wrong with us? Like, seriously, let's be a little bit more independent. I mean, let's rely on each other a little bit. Let's get ideas and stuff from each other. But I'm not interested in following anyone's script. It's just, that's not me. So what does homeschooling cost? Homeschooling costs whatever you want homeschooling to cost. Seriously. The curriculums that I just spoke about are either super cheap or free. So your homeschooling can cost $20 a month, max. And your children will still get a quality education. You pay more than that at public school between the school lunches and the first week supplies and club fees and spirit wear and all of that. So homeschooling is, to begin with, just cheaper than public school, if that makes any sense, because public school is free, right? However, it can get expensive if you choose for it to get expensive. I paid a lot for homeschooling. I started off with private tutors in topics where I did not feel comfortable. Now, there were other options. There were group co-op classes and things of that nature that would have been way cheaper. But the online stuff wasn't as plentiful then as it is now. So like, you don't need to do this, but I used some private tutors. And then I joined the homeschool co-op, like hybrid homeschool program, which is like a very part-time private school. So that was a monthly fee of several. It started off like 75 a month per child when they were young, but when they got to middle school, started adding more specialized courses. And then they did the drama club, and then they did choir, and then they did all those little things. Started adding up, and that cost me a few hundred a month. I balanced that with the free online curriculum, however. So I wasn't paying 100, 200, $1,000 a month for some of the popular homeschool curriculums out there that you noticed I haven't recommended, because honestly, I don't feel like they're worth all that money. That information is online for free. But I did pay maybe 300 a month through middle school and high school. And that's for two children, because I could, but it's absolutely not necessary. There are free ways or very inexpensive ways of getting similar results that I got. Okay, I'm going to take a water break, but first I'm going to say, my name is Miss Andrea. If you are new to this live stream, I am here to answer any question you have on homeschool, college prep, education in general. I am a homeschool veteran of about 20 years, and my specialty is to getting kids into college, whether you are homeschooled or not, with some kind of a scholarship. So if you have a question, please go ahead and ask it. I stay on for 1 hour. We're at 27 minutes. My voice just fries very quickly. So what other questions do I have? Oh, as far as what does homeschooling cost, the average across all homeschoolers at all age grade, at all age levels, is less than $300 a child. Good morning. How do you feel about Hooked on Phonics? That is not a homeschool curriculum, and I don't have a problem with it. Hooked on Phonics is fine. I've seen people do Hooked on Phonics too young, and they become convinced that their child is a prodigy reader, and it just turned out that the child was memorizing. But I haven't used it myself, and I've seen it work well with children who are at reading ready age, more like 4 or 5. But see, I've never seen it have long lasting effects for a 2-year-old, and I see a lot of people trying to use it at age 2. So I think Hooked on Phonics is fine if you use it age appropriately. I used headsprout.com, HEADSPROUT. It cost me $100. It was 100 lessons, learn to read in 100 lessons. Understand that my child had already done kindergarten. This was my youngest, and had graduated kindergarten unable to read. And I knew we were going to have a problem if I didn't fix that post haste. So I found headsprout.com. It cost $100 for the whole 100 lessons. I don't know what it costs now. She is now 24. This was 19 years ago. The Learn to Read programs are fine. They're fine. And I like phonics programs because the sight words confuse the child. It needs to be kind of a combination, but a good phonics background really helps them just read well. It doesn't fix reading comprehension. So when they get to reading, you need to stop them and say, okay, let's talk about what you read, and fix any misconceptions and things like that, and any meaning of word issues that they're having. So I don't think any of the programs are 100% perfect in of themselves. I think you need a multi-pronged approach. So definitely do a phonics program. Work on sight words, and then spend time on vocabulary. Perfect. Perfect. She says we do a combo and we include comprehension. I think you're good. I think you've got it, Rita. So, yeah. Next question. How can you homeschool with a full-time job? Um, by thinking about time differently. Um, the homeschool law across most US states is that you need to homeschool 180 days a year. Yeah. Um, for an average of 4 to 5 hours. Notice I didn't say 8 hours because a lot of time in school is wasted. About 45% of school time is wasted waiting on everyone to be on the same page, getting in lines, behavioral issues, etc. So now we've already gone ahead and lobbed off about 3 hours a day of education by switching from um, traditional school to homeschool. This is why a lot of people with children who act and do athletics and things of that sort homeschool, because it gives them that time back for their rehearsals and their practice. Um, so let's think about this. You work full time. Um, maybe you can do a 4-day week, right? Um, and then you have 3 days left to um, give your child your full attention and homeschool them full time. That's a thing. And then, so during the week that you are working, they can also be doing little assignments here and there. And then that would add up to the other missing days. Now, if you guys are weekend warriors and want to have your fun on the weekend, you can just homeschool in the evening or take an evening shift at work and homeschool in the morning. There are 24 hours in a day, right? You need about 8 of them to sleep, and you need about 8 of them to work. 9, 10 if your work is oppressive. That still leaves you, say you work 10 hours a day, say you're salaried and you work 10 hours a day, you can still carve out those 5 hours a day to homeschool your kids. And all of that homeschool time doesn't have to be one-on-one, face-to-face. 3 of those 5 hours could be them following your instructions and doing assignments on their own, especially after they reach a certain grade. So a fifth grader should be very capable of, reading this book, which you will discuss with them in your one-on-one time to make sure they're not playing games with you. They should be capable of doing a math worksheet on their own, and then you guys can go through them together, correct them, and then explain the ones they got wrong. And then you can teach them the next concept and give them a new worksheet, right? They're capable of um, getting their vocabulary or their spelling list, practicing their spelling with maybe another sibling, writing down their vocabulary. They can, once you've taught them to write essays, they can write an essay on their own. And so now they're working solo 3 hours a day, and then you guys are spending 2 hours a day reviewing their work and teaching them new concepts. So it is super, super, super easy to work a full-time job and homeschool. The problem comes in with daycare, right? Because the best service that public school has to offer is that parents can go to work and know that their children are learning and in a relatively safe environment. And so that's what's missing. So, my recommendations. There are homeschool parents who need a second income, and they are willing to take on your child, um, and even help your child with the homework that you've given them. There are grandparents who are retired. If your child is easy to deal with, they can go hang out with grandma and grandpa with grandma and grandpa's blessing. Of course, they have to be on board with homeschooling. If they don't agree with homeschooling, you're going to have a problem. Um, there are childcare starting to pop up for above 5-year-old children up to like middle school. And then at that point, your children are self sufficient. So your problem isn't homeschooling your kids with a full time job. Let's try that again because my lips got confused. Your problem isn't homeschooling kids with a full time job. Your problem is having your children monitored while you have a full time job. A good friend of mine worked virtually part time. So they were really only out of the house 2.5 to 3 days a week. And then they worked from home the other days. That was super helpful because now they only needed monitoring for their child a couple of days a week. You know what I mean? So there are things you can work out. If you are a two-parent household and you both have to work, you find work where one of you can work opposite the other. Because now there's someone in the house with the child, whether they're fully awake at all times or not, is what it is. But y'all can overlap in a way that someone is in the house at all times and someone is at least partially awake at all times. But that one-on-one homeschool time, you have time to do it. And if you and your other parent can split that instruction time, well, wow, we're doing even better, right? So yeah, that's how you can homeschool with a full-time job. You just need to think about time differently. It's not like the best example is my 2 adult children and I each put 400 or 500 miles on a month on the car. With that in mind, you think we could all share a car, but we all leave the house at the same time. We all have to be somewhere at the same time, and so we can't share a car. Homeschooling is completely different than that. Like homeschooling doesn't have to honor the same 9 to 5 that your job does. You know, you can flex it. I'm gonna give my disclaimer before I drink my water again. My name is Miss Andrea for people who are just signing on. I am a homeschool. I'm a veteran homeschooler. You could say I was a homeschool expert. Been homeschooling since roughly 2002, 2003. My expertise is to getting kids ready for college, into college with scholarships. Doesn't matter if they're homeschooled or not. I have been a homeschool advocate for years and years and years. I started this channel many, many years ago and just came back to it this last year. Ask a question, ask any question, and I will answer it relating to education and homeschooling. Okay, next question. Tell us about unschooling. Unschooling is a thing. Unschooling is a type of homeschooling. It basically is what they would call child-led learning. So basically, you aren't forcing curriculum onto the child that they don't want. You are letting the child pick what they're going to learn today, and you're going to follow their lead. And then there's radical unschooling, where we just leave the children completely alone and wait for them to come to us with what they would like to learn. And then at that point, we help them or we point them toward resources. Unschooling is fine. It's fine. It's fine. Sometimes. I prefer the idea of unschooling very small children because it also drives me crazy when someone writes me and asks me how to homeschool a kindergarten. I'm like, what do you mean they're in kindergarten? Back off. You know what I mean? So I really like the idea of backing off of small children. I love the idea of backing off of small children. Um, and just letting them be and just letting them be children because there are ways to teach children where they have no idea that they're learning. When my kids were small and we just first started homeschooling and we'd be out, in public during school hours, the horror. And people would stop us and speak directly to my children, which I found utterly annoying, and say, why aren't you in school? And my daughter would just look up and say, we don't go to school. And they'd be like, and my son would correct them and go, we homeschool. And then they'd be like, okay, what did you learn? And she goes, we don't, we watch TV. That wasn't true. But she didn't feel like she was doing school. They had their time for learning, which felt like game playing. And then when they were done with that, we watched documentaries and educational TV shows. And then we went to museums and stuff. So I like the idea of unschooling small children. When we hit fourth and fifth grade, I have a problem with unschooling because fourth and fifth graders don't have the wherewithal to know what they need, and to have them in charge of their program seems detrimental. Although my own son and another fifth grader I need went to their parents with website in mind and told them I like to use this website to homeschool because I didn't like what they were homeschooling with at that moment. So there's that. But too many fifth graders will say, well, I hate math, so we're not doing math. And the parent will go, okay, you're in charge. I'm not okay with that. I am not okay with that side of homeschooling. And I'm not okay with a 13-year-old saying, well, I'm not going to college, so I'm not going to read anything and I'm just going to play games. These are just, ooh, y'all, these are just things that I'm not okay with. I appreciate homeschooling for what it is. And when it's done right, it's amazing. I have unschooling friends who take lots of trips, who spend like no time in the house. They go to debate clubs. They go to science lab classes. Like they're unschooling because they don't sit down with a book and do formal things at home, but they're constantly surrounded by learning experiences, and so they do extremely well. A young man who I helped get into college was a radical unschooler. He just didn't touch stuff. Took a couple of community classes here and there, but when I got him as a senior, I had to test him through algebra, geometry, and then put him through a personal finance course so that I could get him into college. Fortunately, this kid was a strong reader and a strong writer and a performer. And so, I could justify that he'd read the entire tome and performed the entire tome of Shakespeare. So, he had classic literature grounding for sure. You know what I mean? They did a lot of historical and scientific museum trips. I was able to compile all that and what he had learned naturally, and I was able to give him tests here and there to show what he knew. And he went to college on full scholarship. So I'm not saying unschool doesn't work. I'm saying you can't give all the responsibility to the kid and step back. You have to work to unschool. Okay, so I've told you about unschooling. If you have any questions, please ask them. tell us about classical homeschooling. Classical homeschooling would be the polar opposite of unschooling. And it is where I started as a homeschooler. And in my homeschool program, where I teach other homeschool kids, besides mine, because mine are grown, I kind of still have a classical homeschooling bent. Classical homeschooling, simply put, is teaching linearly, basically starting with history, um, and teaching it through in order through the time periods. So one year you might do ancient history. The next year you're going to do the classical, medieval, Renaissance time period. The next year you're going to do like 1200 through modern. And then the final year you're going to do modern. So you're going to break up history into 4 time periods. And every year you're going to teach the new time period in order. I might also do a 5th history, which is American history, because I feel like for Americans, we need to learn American history in addition to, world history. And so now while you're teaching those histories in order, you're probably going to have a separate math curriculum, but you're also going to teach the arts according to that time period. You're going to teach literature according to that time period. You're going to teach science discoveries according to that time period. Your vocabulary, your spelling, your anything you can think of, you're going to teach according to that time period. So it's kind of more like a project-based deal. And I really, really do love it. It's not easy to implement at all times. And you still have to teach high schoolers biology separately, chemistry separately, because the colleges want to know that they were taught it concisely and not just in order by experiments, and they're going to want proof of labs. So personally, we just talked about unschooling. I like the idea of letting kids alone until they're like in 4th grade, and then teaching. Oh, what I left out is, so you're on this 4-year rotation with unschooling. You loop through it 3 times traditionally. And in Rome, in Athens, where formal education kind of started, they would do that. They would teach the same thing 4 times in a 3 times in a 4-year cycle, about 12 years. And the first time you're just giving them information. They're absorbing it and you're telling. The second time you go through this rotation of information, you're discussing it more. You're getting them to talk and discuss about why things happen. And then the third time you go through it, now you're in full debate mode. And the talking is equal back and forth. You're examining it more, and all of that. So personally, like I said, I've spoken about unschooling, and I really like it up to like 4th grade. And honestly, I don't feel like we need to go through the classical homeschool cycle 3 times. I think you need to go through it once or twice and give children the benefit of the doubt of being smart enough to absorb it before just do the discussion, the whole time. So like 5th through 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, I would do a classical cycle through history and sciences and the whole thing. And then when I get to 9th grade, then I'm going to more buckle in on the college prep situations. Simple Life, Grateful Wife asked, do you have any experience with My Father's World? And if so, what are your views? I'm typing it in. It sounds super familiar to me. So I'm going to go ahead and start off by saying, if people don't know by now, I'm not a fan of homeschool curriculums per se. I just feel like too much information out there that you can explore and build your own curriculum once you get comfortable with that. But okay, I'm looking at my father's world. Family unit, 1st through 8th grade. Get it now. What does it cost? Please don't let me faint. They're not telling you what it costs because you got to give them your information. Do you know what it costs? Shop by grade. Let me do 4th grade. One more. I can tell you what I don't like. I don't like that I can't see the price. So I have no idea what it costs. What does my father's curriculum cost? It says it's Mormon. That's fine. But I think they do a good job educating. Oh, $350 to $400 a year, which is just a little bit more than your typical $300 per child homeschool cost. It can get up to $500. Okay, so that's the first deal. The cost is reasonable, it's fine. And it looks like it's very book-based. You can go by theme, or you can go by grade, which is kind of cool. Let me do theme. Oh, music and art. Okay, theme is subjects. Our philosophy. This is going to help me. Only one teacher's manual. Okay, that saves you some money. Perfect for one child or multiple students. Combines top learning. Ooh. It combines classical education, Charlotte Mason. Charlotte Mason is awesome. It's about reading. Now, like I said earlier, where I think you just let your kids read kind of whatever they want, and then you work in more books. Charlotte Mason doesn't allow, it has no room, it has no patience for modern consumed books. It includes unit studies and it includes literature. It covers all subjects. Literature is not a learning philosophy, is it? I guess. Great books, a great books learning philosophy. I don't know why they called it literature. Includes living books. Living books are what I love about Charlotte Mason. Literature, timelines. Timelines are the best. Just take a wall and put the whole timeline on it and just build on it all year. Nature walks, whatever, it's fine. I don't like outside, but I'm weird. Unit study approach is fabulous. The classic education, the Hebraic way, God-centric curriculum. Where's the Greco-Roman classical, which I was just talking about with classical. But we teach your children who God is. Bible integration. So here's my deal. I'm Christian, and I have played with Christian curriculums over the year. And I found it redundant because we were in church Sundays and Wednesdays, and my kids were getting a good grounding in the Bible and just their Christianity in general. Plus, their homeschool hybrid program was also Christian, and they were taking what's called worldview classes where they learned all religions. So when it was time to do language arts, I just wanted to do language arts. When it was time to do history, I just wanted to do history. Did some things not jive with what we believe spiritually? Maybe. I remember my daughter being very upset that it was time to read Greek and Roman mythology. And she was like, this is against my religion. This does not sync up with what I believe as a Christian. And I said to her, she was about 9, I said, that's fine, but you have to know that this information is out there. And so I want you to read this. And when you write your essay, here's what you write. You write, according to Greek mythology, this is what they believe. This is what happened. According to Roman mythology, this is what happened. You don't have to state it as fact. You reference it back. If you love this, fine, do it. But if you're already doing religious instruction, why double down so hard? And I always get in trouble for talking about curriculums. I do. But I believe in a Christian or whatever your religion is. I believe in a religious upbringing and a secular curriculum. Because remember, as a homeschooler, if there's something in the curriculum that you don't like, you can literally take a razor and cut the pages out if you're that opposed to it. Do you know what I'm saying? So it's a little more than you need to pay. I do love the classical approach. I do love the Charlotte Mason influence. I think it trickles down in religion. And so what I've seen happen is both of my homeschool kids went to college, and they both met other homeschool kids because they find each other. And several of the homeschool kids ended up dropping out for the reason that they didn't have the science background they needed to play on that college level. They had to take extra history classes because they didn't have the history knowledge they needed to play on that higher level. So whatever homeschool curriculum you choose to use, make sure you vet it for completeness. Like compare it to a secular textbook, and secular textbooks are so inexpensive. And you can actually just go on Amazon.com and open a table of contents and compare the table of contents to the other books, chapter to chapter, to see what's in there. You just want to make sure that you don't leave things out. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm very flattered. Okay, so we have 3 minutes. Do we have any more questions? I have a couple more here, but my voice is absolutely fine. Charlotte Mason was the next question, but we just spoke about it. So let's finish off with this question. What homeschool methods did you use? The homeschool methods I used was what you would call relaxed homeschooling or eclectic homeschooling. A woman named Mary Hood wrote a book called Relaxed Homeschooling, and it changed my life. And then she also has the Relaxed Homeschool.com. And actually not too far from where I live. Oh, no, this is not the same person. This is not Mary Hood, unless she sold it. This is somebody named Jenny that has the relaxedhomeschool.com. But I read a little paperback book called Relaxed Homeschooling. And basically, it just fit my personal philosophies about raising children, which was don't frustrate the babies. Let them be happy. Let them have joy. And so basically it was teach them, don't overwhelm them. So the relaxed homeschooling let me combine a little bit of unschooling and a little bit of classical homeschooling, which are polar opposites, right? And then, so I kind of made sure that they were learning in a classical order, and I made sure I was integrating as much of the other subjects into that. But we only did that for 3-4 hours a day, an hour of math, 2 to 3 hours of our classical unit, and then I let them do whatever they wanted after lunch, as long as it was quiet, because I was also, earlier question, working from home. I was blogging, I was ghost blogging, and I was writing for several educational websites. Bleh, my lips do that. The only one of those sites that are still full time in existence is it parenting? Oh darn! I'll put the link below. I don't remember. But they're selling that site, so it's also going away. But the whole time my children were homeschooling, I was also working from home. So we did our focused homeschooling in the morning. They got up, they played piano, they did math, we did our units, and then they could read whatever they wanted. They had 3 or 4 TV channels they were allowed to use. They were all like Animal Planet, Learning Channel. Look, my children understood reproduction well because I think it was Discovery that had so much, like that was the time period where they were doing a birthing stories and the animal birthing story and the human birthing stories, and my kids watched it and I was like, well, that's education. So we did classical focused in the morning, and the afternoon they could read and they could watch educational things and they could play educational games. So I mixed it up. But I made them work hard um, in the mornings, and then I let them pull back in the evenings. And then when we got to high school, I did ramp it up a little bit, but it was only like 3 days a week because they were spending 1 to 2 days a week at their homeschool co-op too, where they were getting all the arts and stuff, and that was very homework intensive. So that's the homeschooling methods I use. I combined classical and unschooling methods. Do you think time for learning is complete learning for all subjects? I almost said yes, but also no. It is your base. It is your base. If you do time for learning, you're getting the minimal that they need. You're getting what they're going to get in school. But I liked to supplement with extra reading and in-person field trips to educational things. When we were doing time for learning, we did it 4 days a week, and on Fridays we went out into the world and we did more things. And we also did some evenings we went out and we did more things. And we spent a lot of time learning, and we still had our big Kingfisher history encyclopedia book that we would just cuddle up and read through like it was a storybook. So yeah, I love time for learning. I think if you're just starting to homeschool, it's super complete and can get you through and make sure you know that you've done the bare minimum that you need to do. But it's always great to supplement, especially if there are things your kids are interested in. Now you've done time for learning. Now you have time to explore. Now you have time to unschool those subjects that your child is interested in. I am 3 minutes over, so I'm about to close up. And I thank everybody so much for being here. Simple Life, Grateful Wife, maybe in my area in July. I would love to meet up and talk about all things homeschool. I would love that. I'd love to do a collaboration with you. How about that? That would be wonderful. So during July, I'm going to be busy writing my full year curriculum for next year, which will get shared. And I will definitely have time to meet up. In advance, send me your dates so I can make sure I'm not out of town. Okay? So thank you everybody for hanging out with me. Thank you for asking your homeschool questions. I'm not positive. I have to check my dates to see if I can do this again next Saturday at 11. If not next Saturday, the one after. I know one of those 2 Saturdays I can't do it. But I'm going to try and do these lives at least 3 to 4 times a month, depending on my schedule, or on Saturdays at 11. So mark your calendar, check in. I'll schedule them several days in advance so you can get notified. Thank you guys. Thank you. I appreciate you, and I appreciate your trust in me. And you really build me up when you tell me that I do a good job. So that's it for today. Until next time.